Hello and welcome. In this special conversation on BW TV and in the run-up to our special and a milestone 45th anniversary issue of BW Businessworld, we are talking to industry leaders and policymakers who are shaping the economic future of our country. Today I'm joined in this special episode with someone who brings a rare blend of history and economics in his writing, thoughts and perspectives. And in all humility, I can say he's somebody who understands better what the Prime Minister thinks of the country's economic future and the larger goal of Viksit Bharat at 2047. Viewers, I'm joined by Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, who's the member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. Mr. Sanyal, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure to be here.
And this is one long conversation. We'll be talking more on the economy and some recent issues. But first of all, just to get the ball rolling, last 5 years, lot that the Indian economy saw, the pandemic, the geopolitical conflicts, then of course the trade dynamics. How do you see the Indian economy? And resilience, I think, is one word that has been overused, but I think that is something which the economy exhibited. So your opening thoughts on how the economy has fared in these last 5 years?
So the 5 years were a particularly tricky time. The first 2 years of it, of course, was spent dealing with the COVID crisis, and of course a huge amount of uncertainty. It threw us all off around the world, but I think it is now fair to say that we came out of it relatively well compared to almost any other country in the world. Our approach in dealing with COVID had been quite different. As you will remember, we took a much more restrained approach to didn't go out there and open out the gates of monetary and fiscal policy in the way many global experts had advised us. But as a result of that, our macro stability indicators are in good shape. Inflation is now running at 2%. In fact, it may now there is a danger of it falling below the threshold of the inflation targeting range. Meanwhile, on the external front, the external accounts, current account and external debt, etc., very well within control. And of course, our banking system is in robust health. In fact, some may begin to even argue that it is not expanding aggressively enough given the level of capitalization. So macroeconomic stability-wise, doing very well. On the growth front, we are doing well. We came out of the crisis, grew for much faster. Obviously, that was a part of the bounce. But then in the last 1 odd year, we have slowed down a bit, as you will be aware, growing at somewhere in the range of 6.5%. Still doing very well compared to the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is not growing, so in comparison, doing well. But I think we are now becoming confident, given the stability of our macro numbers, that the growth momentum can perhaps be accelerated as we begin to get a better sense of the new world we are emerging onto. We were a little extra careful over the last year or so, given the tariff wars, given the war that you had in first in Ukraine, then in the Middle East, then of course we had our own episode. So given all of that, we were a little more restrained. But I think we have now a situation where we are now signing free trade agreements. We have a better sense of how the rest of the world is doing. And now we are beginning to see momentum coming in from the private sector and from MNCs in terms of investment. So I think there is now a case for pressing the accelerator going forward.
Absolutely. Now, very rightly you mentioned that macros are right, the private capex is coming in now. But when it comes to growth, you rightly mentioned that we've seen a slowdown in the last 1 month, but there's a larger issue of it not being distributed well. It's a politically charged issue as well in the country, and something quite highlighted in your paper as well, one of your recent papers, that post 91 liberalization, some of the states fared well, some didn't. So in your understanding, when this whole topic of inequality comes up or the distribution of growth comes up, how do you see that? What worked for some states well, what didn't, and how do we achieve that for the states that couldn't do that?
Well, if you're taking a longer term view, since going back to the 91 reforms, then the fact is that there's no doubt in terms of the sheer size of our economy, we have come to a stage where we are now the world's fourth largest economy as of this year, going past Japan, and by most indications in the next 24 odd months we will go past Germany to become the third largest economy. So that is mostly now accepted. Now the question then is, okay, our per capita incomes are rising. Some could argue it should rise a little bit faster, but by and large I think now it is accepted that we are seeing per capita incomes rising quite quickly, and the compounding effect of that is beginning to show. So you can see, for example, absolute poverty decline very sharply in the last few years. Not just our own indicators, but also other external bodies like the World Bank have also commented on the fact that there has been a sharp decline in inequality in the absolute poverty in the country. Now comes the debate on inequality. So while absolute poverty is dropping, people are debating what is happening to inequality. Now, there is also now evidence from the consumption-based Gini coefficients and other things that even in terms of consumption inequality, India is not one of the more unequal countries in the world. There has been a lot of debate about this, but I think by and large now people accept that first, I think while data is not very good on this, I think income inequality is perhaps not as unequal as people make it out to be. And secondly, there is the effect, of course, of all the government schemes they have put in, whether it's food or other kinds of Ayushman Bharat and so on. And so the net result of this is that India's consumption Gini coefficient is actually one of the better ones in the world. It's certainly not as some people accuse being an excessively unequal society. Our real problem, which I keep pointing out, is really a spatial one, is that the eastern half of India is distinctly poorer than the western half of India. People go on about the north-south divide, but in fact on any socio-economic indicator, it's actually an east-west divide. I mean, it's quite clear that West Bengal, Bihar, or even eastern UP, even if you look within states, you'll see that the eastern part of it is poorer than the western part. So you look at Madhya Pradesh, the eastern part is poorer than the western part. You look at UP, any big state, it's also true. So we have a situation where the eastern half of India is distinctly poorer than the western half of the country, and some of it goes back to, of course, the decline of Bengal and specifically of Kolkata over the last half a century. But there are other issues as well. I mean, the infrastructure build out in the eastern half has been worse than before, but also certain parts of the country have done spectacularly well and they should be given credit. So for example, you see the 4 southern states, they were not particularly high performing till 1991. So when this 1991 opening up happened, it is the southern states that have benefited the most from it. You had states like Maharashtra, which were always industrial. They have continued to do well. And then you have Gujarat, that has been another high performance state in recent years. So you have all these states. There's of course Delhi NCR that has done decently well. So point I'm making is that post 91, certain parts of the country have distinctly taken off. And many of those parts were not great performers before 91. So the dynamics of a market economy have benefited certain parts of the country clearly more than others.
Mr. Sanyal, you mentioned about the trade agreements that India has signed in recent times, most notably with the United Kingdom. A few days back, Prime Minister was in London. And all of this, comes at a time when we have rising trade tensions, particularly with China and Donald Trump coming in, and the kind of trade deal that has been going on, negotiations going on. And with all of this, India has its manufacturing ambitions. How can India, leverage its competitive strength to, double down on these areas, which probably, it was not able to in the past, and now that it has its ambitions, but with these global dynamics, how should it navigate?
If you've seen that we have actually done rather well in the services field, every major big multinational company in the world now has a GCC in India. So we have emerged as the office of the world. But it is true that except for a few areas like pharmaceuticals, maybe more recently with mobile smartphones, we have shown some ability to capture market in those segments. But I think overall it is fair to say that we have not been just as equally successful in goods exports.
Okay.
So what should we do about it? Now, in order to understand this, we first need to understand that the world has completely changed in the last 5 years. The kind of market arrangements that used to exist till a few years ago no longer exist, and what we are seeing is that the world is beginning to divide up into blocks. Now, this is not the Cold War sense of Soviet bloc versus the US led Western bloc. Instead, what you are likely to end up with, and I'm guessing here, you're likely to end up with a network of bilateral deals of various kinds. Now, in that web of these deals, of course, there will be two sort of big players, like centers of gravity, one being China and the other being the US. And so we have to now fit ourselves into that. Of course, as a growing economy, we will also be some center of gravity in our own right as well. But we now have to navigate this world. Now, what are we doing? We are clearly signaling a few things. First of all, we consciously kept out of RCEP, as you know. At the same time, we have signed trade deals with, we already had something with Japan, we now did with, more recently with Australia, with the UAE, we have just signed another one with the United Kingdom. We are in advanced discussions with Europe and with the US. So, in this world, we are signing up, in a sense, an alignment that we are building. It takes advantage of various things, not the least the fact that there is many companies in the world which want an alternative to China, and we can provide it in certain areas. So that is one way in which we are doing it. This doesn't mean that we will not trade with China. There are many areas where we will trade with China. China is a source of many important inputs. Even if we are dealing with other countries, they are also at the cutting edge of many sectors now. So we can't wish them away, and we will continue to trade with them. But we have now begun to position ourselves on this chessboard in a particular way, and that at least we think will serve our interest the best.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Sanyal, since we've talking about these countries at the global stage now, I want to take something from your assertion in recent times that you've argued that India must set its own global norms rather than adhering to Western benchmarks. In which of these areas, be it economic, technology, do you see we have been able to do that, or some areas where you still think progress is being made and we'll achieve that in years to come?
So obviously we can't escape global norms on everything, but there are areas which are not defined or up for grabs where we can. So there will be areas of technology where we are big players, or we can work with who are the leading lights of that space, and we can begin to create the outlines of this new of the new rules that come. But there are many areas where where the rules are basically fluid, but we don't seem to dare to create the global norms. Let's take, for example, this whole discussion on ESG, environmental, social and governance norms. Now, who has decided what those norms should be? A tiny number of North Atlantic NGOs and think tanks have come up with their own norms. There's nothing to suggest that those are the norms that should be, and there are serious problems with those. But we in India didn't somehow engage with this topic. I personally think that we need to first of all push back against the sort of arbitrary imposition of CBAM and these kinds of norms on India. But to the extent that we want to engage with them at all, we should say that it should be our norms.
Absolutely.
So otherwise what will happen is that you will end up with a peculiar situation where green steel is defined in a peculiar way, in which the Europeans happen to own all the patents. It's got nothing to do with how much emissions happens.
Let's shift our focus to employment. I think it's one of the highly contested issues, and given how the developments have panned out in the last 5 years, with the advent of gig economy, AI coming in, of course, just yesterday TCS announcing 12,000 job cuts. The economic survey put the onus of job creation and employment on the private sector, the last year's economic survey, and calls for a tripartite compact between government, private sector and academia. Now, how do you see this tripartite compact working to solve this problem, and in all these years, where do you think we lagged in putting these three entities together?
So I don't think it quite works in that way. I don't remember the economic survey coin presenting it as academia being, for example, an important part of that equation. The fact of the matter is this, that we always live in a world where continuous technology is changing, the geopolitical environment is changing, consumer behavior is changing, the prices of critical inputs are going up and down. So it's a dynamic world. New sectors will emerge, old will die. Companies, countries, governments will have to keep reorganizing and redeploying resources. So the single most important thing in all of this is that there is fluidity in our ability to redeploy our human resources and jobs according to the environment in which we find ourselves. One of the problems we used to have and still have embedded in some way in sort of a socialist mindset that we have is that, oh my God, we must try to save jobs. Let me tell you, you never end up saving jobs by attempting to create rigid systems that supposedly protect jobs. In the end, technology will move forward anyway. And so this Luddite argument falls flat. What you need instead to do is to allow for the transition, whether it's in terms of reskilling or all kinds of government regulations that get in the way of new sectors from emerging, or portability of EPFO, for example. We are basically getting in the way of the fluidity ourselves. Now, this is not to suggest that certain kinds of regulations are not needed. You need them for safety, labor safety. You need to have fair treatment of labor and so on. Those are perfectly fine. But interfering with fluidity is a bad idea. And I can tell you that this idea sometimes people have that academia will be able to train the workers of the future is fundamentally flawed. By the time curriculums emerge in those new areas, those areas have already moved on. So it is much better to create fluid systems and allow companies to emerge and grow fast in those new areas than to wait for academia to figure out where those areas are. So I am a much bigger votary of apprenticeships and of creating skilling and rapid skilling than getting caught up in traditional academic degrees. We need a much more fluid system of certification, of allowing people to upskill and so on and so forth.
Since we are talking about jobs and the young population, which matters the most on this topic, you've been very vocal about the demographic dividend and how India is probably losing the narrative there. Finally, after years, we have the census process now in motion, and when the data comes out, we'll have some insightful findings, especially on this part. But now that we are also seeing several regions in our country facing population declines, and given how you've been vocal about India failing to reap the dividends of its demographic dividend, how do you see all of it?
So the point I'm making is a very common sense point, is that our demographic dividend will not last forever. It will last for about 30 years. We are already into that 30-year phase. The peak in the number of children born in India was hit 25 years ago, in 2001. Those children are now beginning to enter the workforce. Okay, so we are already in a situation where the number of children born has peaked long time ago, and the fertility rate in India is now below replacement rate for the country as a whole. And in certain parts of the country, like in, for example, West Bengal, southern India or Himachal, they are now very far below replacement rates. So the first point I keep making is, why do we continue to have population control measures? Makes no sense. We should first thing we should do is remove them. And rather than complain about the fact that UP and Bihar have somewhat still above a replacement rate, because but for them, we would have a real crisis in the country as a whole. You need that part of the country to generate enough children, because without that, even textile mills in Tirupur can't function.
Right.
So first of all, stop complaining about UP and Bihar birth rates.
Okay.
The rest of the country, instead of complaining about their birth rate, should in fact try to increase their own. First point. Second point is that since this is the next 20, 30 years where we'll be at we need to get on with the business of growth, but this requires us to think about new things in a different way. Take, for example, universities. Okay, we are still, when we build a university, we go out there and take 300 acres of land. Why do you need 300 acres of land to build a university? Number one, they'll say, oh, because in future we will expand. I'm sorry, this is the moment. Okay, it is, if you already have a large campus, this is the moment to fill it out. Similarly, we have factories. Any project in India, some hundreds of acres of land is taken for even relatively small projects. The idea is, where will we have the land to expand? I'm sorry, this is the moment. Use up that land. If you are unable to use up the land that you have taken for whatever activity it is, it should be taken back by the state and redeployed. Otherwise, what we are doing is that every project in India has this land grab, and this unnecessarily makes land in India very, very expensive. Instead, we need to see that this spike is going to happen now, next 25, 30 years. So we need to max it out now.
Quite connected question is, because we're talking about the young population of our country, is you critiquing the UPSC obsession with the students, wasting their prime years and not channeling their energy probably towards entrepreneurship. How do you see that? I mean, what's the problem when it comes to the education system?
So I'll tell you what the problem is. It's partly a cultural problem. I mean, I interact all the time with young people. There is a huge expectations of society, family, etc. to do this kind of thing. It's not like there aren't jobs in other places. In any case, even if those jobs are difficult to get, they're certainly easier than getting an UPSC job. So just to give you an example, the main UPSC exam that happens, there are some 1,000 people are hired every year. Now for that, some 6-7 lakh people take that exam. 12 lakh actually apply, 12 lakh registered, 6 lakh actually take the exam. Now you tell me, what is the probability of getting through it? The failure rate in this is 99.99%. Okay? Now you tell me that virtually in any other activity in the world, with a failure rate of 99.99, would you be encouraging more and more people to do this?
Absolutely
not. Right? In fact, you have a higher chance of becoming super successful by becoming an entrepreneur, Olympic athlete, literally anything else you want to do, you will succeed way faster than this. And yet, lakhs of, and these are not the less talented, these are the most talented. After all, to keep a young person in Mukherjee Nagar or some such place for years on end, studying for the exam, requires that a significant resource is put behind this person, to stay there, pay those coaching coaching classes, fees, etc., and for years on end. And this is not just input, but whereas that person could have been working and actually providing income.
Absolutely.
So what is actually a negative should actually be a positive. Now that person is usually the brightest kid in the family or the village or the school, right? Because otherwise you wouldn't spend so much money supporting this person. Instead, so you have some of the brighter children in the country, through social pressure, being put into an activity where they are almost guaranteed failure. Now I cannot think of a bigger waste of talent than this. Now I have nothing against those guys who get through. Fine, you've got through, succeeded. Okay. What about the other 99.99%? And this whole thing is being fed by a coaching industry which is absolutely predatory. They are basically like selling drugs. And which other product If I sell you something, if I sell you a television and tell you it is 99.99% going to fail, will not work, will you buy it? So the coaching classes are selling a product that is going to fail 99.9%, and then after failing, the next year they'll tell you, no, do it again and again. And so you are beginning to get an entire class of young Indians who are using their best years, spending money to do something in which they're 100% going to fail, almost. Yeah.
Right.
And what is worse, they at the end of it, they have gained no skill.
Absolutely.
There's no skill. So now they are frustrated for life. So we have young, talented people frustrated for life, being put into a system where they are guaranteed failure.
Right.
Now, I cannot think of a bigger loss of human capital than this.
Absolutely, very rightly put, Mr. Sanyal. Let's talk about the private sector a bit. The economic survey again, talked about their balance sheet swelling in the last 4 years and government attributing them as swimming in excess profits. Now, there are some concerns about major duopolies or monopolies being formed in the sector, especially, given the Air India crash right now, some debates on how the consumers are left with only 2 choices in the aviation market, and there are certain other sectors as well. In fact, in March 23, former RBI Deputy Governor spoke about dismantling the top 5 conglomerates. How much of this is a concern for the government? And
so, the fact that Indian companies have now become large and become global scale is a good thing in my view.
okay.
As a first instance.
Yeah.
My problem really is that having reached scale, they are now not taking the next step, at least not doing it adequately, to go out there and conquer markets. After all, once Samsung and LG became big conglomerates, they were going out there and conquering global markets. Mitsubishi, when it became big global, we do not see the same thing happening with our companies. There will be I'm generalizing, there are Indian companies that are doing it, but where, for all our success in the IT sector, where are the great IT products? Where is India's Google, or where is India's Facebook, where is India's X, or whatever? I mean, you tell me, where are why haven't we produced them? Or, where is the real cutting edge of any product that you can say? We are very proud that Apple has begun manufacturing phones here, but where is our Apple?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, look at what China has done. In the last decade, look at the number of cutting edge brands they have created. I mean, I hadn't heard of BYD till 2-3 years ago, and it's everywhere now.
You saw them on Indian roads.
Yeah, well, I saw them outside India, but yeah, they're now on Indian roads as well. So, point I'm making is, we now have Indian companies with the balance sheets to do these things, build brands, do R&D, do R&D. So, you have large Indian companies with almost no R&D. So, when I ask industry leaders, why don't you invest in R&D? They say, it is risky to do R&D. Yes, it is. That is why we let you have these, that's why we have entrepreneurs. They are supposed to take risk.
Right.
If they weren't taking risk, why would we be encouraging supernormal profits? Because we think that the drive of becoming bigger, global size companies, that is the attraction that would drive R&D, drive the zest to go out there and create global brands, global products, etc. Right. The purpose of all of this is not to create family offices in Dubai. Let me be absolutely clear.
Absolutely.
So, Indian companies need to compete, and if they require protection in their home market, it is only so that they can go out there and compete and create global scale. It is not the purpose to protect them at home so that they can, as I said, create family offices in Dubai, or brag about some obscure CSR project they are doing.
Right, and very rightly put, Mr. Sanyal, especially the post-operation Sindoor, if we see the kind of innovation our entrepreneurs have done in the defense space.
Absolutely.
And how
so when they are forced or encouraged to do it, they do it.
They do it.
But there are many parts of the economy where incumbents have just gotten used to perpetuating themselves, and I think the time has come to open it up to some competition, including from foreign companies in some cases.
Mr. Sanyal, let me come to the capital markets as well. We've seen heightened retail participation in recent times, people switching from bank deposits to mutual funds, and maybe some high risk instruments like F&O, derivatives and all. And recently how you saw the Jane Street saga unfolding and the retail investors losing quite a lot of money. The government also flagged the financialization risks with heightened retail participation in the market. How is the government seeing all of these developments in the capital markets and the need to protect retail investors with heightened against people who have the resources and capital to trade on those high risk instruments?
So here we have to be a little careful between having transparent, well-regulated financial systems and converting ourselves into some sort of a nanny state. Yeah. Because that nanny state approach ultimately has many misuses in redirecting resources to things which the state may want but is not necessarily fruitful to society as a whole. So given this balance, I think the SEBI, for example, has now begun to investigate this Jane Street matter. It's a sub judice, so I cannot comment on it. But as I said, there has to be reasonable scrutiny of what these kinds of more opaque instruments do. At the same time, however, we do want to encourage Indians to participate in, for example, the financial markets. If India is going to grow, then India's people should also participate in the growth of wealth and equity that it generates. You don't want only the rich who are able to invest large amounts to be owners of companies to become the beneficiaries of it. You want the middle class, for example, or even the poor to participate and see their earnings, etc. rise, compound. At the same time, every higher return comes with higher risk, and people need to understand that that trade-off is there, and there is an element of risk, there is an element of skill in it. So there are the whole plethora of investment instruments should be available, and they should be liquid and easy to buy and sell them. And people should be explained so some people should put some part of their money in fixed deposits and fixed return. Some part of it should go to higher risk but higher return. So this range of instruments, availability of instruments should be there, and they should be transparent. Right. Here there are, as I said, there was a case of non-transparency with some of these derivatives, etc., and excessive retail participation may not be healthy. Something SEBI is looking at and they can do. There's of course the other issue which is unrelated actually to this financialization, which is of outright fraud and manipulation, which is a different issue, by the way. And I think that issue needs to be taken very, very seriously.
Okay. Towards the last leg of our interview, let's connect it back to our theme of 2047 Viksit Bharat. When you see these three factors of production, land, labor, capital, where do you think we have made the most progress among these three fronts since independence? Where do we lack completely? And now, as this government is in its third term, where should be the priority or the foundation laid among these three factors, so as to realize?
Actually, firstly, the single most important factor of production is actually none of these three. It is actually entrepreneurship and its close cousin, technology. Land, labor and capital are actually only meaningful if there is an entrepreneurial class, spirit in society, not just a class, entrepreneurial spirit in society, because sometimes that risk-taking behavior may come from the state, or it may come from many parts of society, not necessarily a sort of a class of entrepreneurs. So this risk-taking spirit is, in my view, the single biggest driver of any society or civilization. Okay. When India was a great civilization, in our long periods of our history, when we were sort of, you can say that we were leading light in the rest of the world, we were the cutting edge on many things. Indian merchants were sailing the Indian Ocean beyond. We were at the cutting edge of technology and science and mathematics. cultural things that we exported to the rest of the world. But the key driving force of this is a spirit of adventure, a risk-taking culture. This is the single most important thing. And the problem is that after 1947, we, thanks to this socialist mindset, essentially squeezed it out. Okay, till 1991, what did we say? That some bureaucratic system sitting in some planning commission will give out licenses and permits. Obviously, we killed our entrepreneurial zeal, and we didn't just kill it in the sphere of business, we killed it in everything. So, before independence, under colonial rule, we were able, India-based Indians were able to win Nobel Prizes in literature, in science, and so on. Since independence, we have now had 78 years of being independent. No India-based Indian has won a Nobel Prize in any area of human excellence. Mother Teresa doesn't count in this. If anything, she is a sign of the failure of our society, not of our success. Right? So the point I'm making is that this spirit was killed. Then, starting 90s, it began to come back. You began to see a new class of entrepreneurs, etc., emerge in the form of the IT companies and so on. But this is not just about doing it once. It is an ongoing process of creative destruction. And this spirit is beginning to slowly revive, and you're beginning to see, you know, the innovativeness of many things. Whether you're seeing it in literature, all kinds of new writers are suddenly available. You know, go back 25 years and look at the writers. They're all the same, you know, left-leaning type writers, all of them from either South Mumbai or Central Delhi, with the same kind of narrative, and they're all friends and cousins of each other. Okay. Now look at the variety of writing that is happening in India, and I wished it would. We saw more of it in many of the regional languages. It's happening in some places like Kannada, but not everywhere. But it'll come, because that openness is happening. Look at the amount of. If you go and look at the types of films that are happening, you go back and look at the 1970s and 80s film. I mean, you'll have the odd one like Sholay, which are really one of my favorites. But by and large, the creativity of Bollywood was, you know, there was the same kind of plots in each decade. There's much more variety today.
Absolutely.
Okay, and that's not just happening on movies. It's happening on you know, OTT platforms, reels, whatever. You may not like the reel. Some of it gets quite annoying. I agree, but look at the amount of creativity that's happening. You're now seeing the same thing happening in technology. You know, the number of patents we are granting has dramatically gone up. You go to any university. Okay, who are the cool people in the university today? When I was at the university, they were all the student leader types. Okay, and today the cool people are entrepreneurs or a sportsman or doing something different kinds of you know, startups. The cool guys are doing the startups. They are doing all kinds of interesting different kinds of things, or they are studying subjects which are didn't exist there. So the flourishing that is happening in our universities is a reflection of this opening up of India that simply did not happen before. And this is what makes me quite confident of India. So I would argue that it is the risk-taking culture that is the single most important factor of production. And I am very confident that this is what is going to drive India. The rest of the stuff organizes itself around this risk-taking behavior.
So my last question connected to this only, since you're talking so much about entrepreneurship and the risk-taking ability. So when we are talking about Viksit Bharat 2047, your message to the leaders who will probably take this vision forward, your message to the entrepreneurs in your concluding.
So when I am using the word entrepreneur, I don't mean it in the narrow sense of, you know, he set up a business and that is also part of it. But every kind of person who's doing different things. So they may be people who are writers. A writer is an entrepreneur. A sportsman is an entrepreneur and risk taker. Policy makers who are doing reforms, they are entrepreneurs. Let me assure you, it's a tough business making a change, and you take a risk on multiple levels when you make a policy change and make, it's tough. people who are doing all kinds of social projects of various kinds. So there are a whole range of areas, scientists who are making discoveries. We have just, even Indian astronauts going into space, they're risk takers, they're entrepreneurs, literally risking their own lives in the project. So what I'm trying to say is this risk-taking, adventurous spirit is what drives the country or any civilization. We were a great country because we had this adventurous spirit, and after almost a few centuries of kind of it being first in decline and then deliberately suppressed by ourselves, we are beginning to see a period of this flourishing again.
So that was Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, Member, Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, talking about a host of issues concerning the Indian economy and what exactly it would take for India to achieve its goal of Viksit Bharat at 2047, with deep focus on entrepreneurship and risk taking. Mr. Sanyal, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure speaking to you.
Pleasure.